Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us. My name is Brian Horlick. I'm a condominium lawyer, senior partner at Horlick, Levitt, Lella. And welcome to our weekly live stream. As you know, or should know by now, we host a weekly live stream every Wednesday at 12 noon. There's lots of information on anything that you want to ask, whether it's COVID-19 related, or legal questions in general regarding condominium law. I'm happy to say that we have many board members that regularly log into our live stream. We have many condominium managers that log in. And I always say, if you want to become a condo genius while you're eating your lunch, pick up your head, look at your computer, and watch our live stream. So to start things off, what's new in COVID-19? I will tell you that there was information that came out recently dealing with gyms, and that is information from the government dealing with public gyms, such as health clubs and that type of thing. But what you hear, or what the government directives are with respect to public gyms, you need to take a good look at that and see how you can learn from those guidelines for your own condominium corporations if you intend to open your gyms. So, of course, the gym, like all other amenities, you need to practice social distancing. You need to have 2 meters between people. That would as well mean at least 2 meters between machines. You need to ensure that if you're providing equipment, the equipment is cleaned and sanitized after every use. Again, as with all indoor activities, you are limited to a maximum of 50 people. If you're going to be opening up yoga studio, things that require mats, etc., those are difficult matters to clean, difficult issues to clean, and you may want to insist that residents bring their own yoga mats, or other type of things. Weights, of course, you'll have in your gym, and the weights need to be cleaned after every usage. Some condo corporations have instituted a reservation system to ensure the physical distancing, and the reservation system would require, perhaps online or with the concierge, setting out what time you intend to use the facility. And some condo corporations are as well pre-screening the residents with respect to a COVID-19 questionnaire. So all of these things are very important to keep in mind if you intend to open up the gym. The gym, like every other amenity, needs to be carefully opened. If you haven't opened yours, you need to decide whether in fact you want to open it or not, whether it's worthwhile to open it. And unfortunately, all of these COVID-19 guidelines come with a cost that no condominium corporation budgeted for. Cost with respect to cleaning, cost with respect to, disinfectant, and so on and so forth. All of these are costs that can get expensive when you're dealing with not only the gym, the card room, party rooms, etc., guest rooms. Everything now in stage 3 basically is open, other than I think saunas and I think it was whirlpools. It was saunas and steam rooms. They have to still remain closed. So we still have COVID-19. People should not be getting confident, overconfident, or even slightly confident, because the pandemic is still with us. Although, we are past at the moment, we are in the post-peak pandemic, but the pandemic is still here. And like a boomerang, at any moment in time when you think you've got it, it's got you. So everybody, please continue the good job that you're doing. And I know, as I say all the time, but it has to be a fact, Doug Ford, I know you're watching this live stream, and keep on doing the great job that you're doing. So we sent out our FAQ, our frequently asked questions. We send that out every Monday. And those of you that are on our list, you would get that. Everything there is the most recent and up-to-date news on COVID-19. Everything has a footnote and a link to the government source. It's a really one-step shop for everyone to know what's going on with COVID-19. And I guess it's a compliment that all of the other condo lawyers in Ontario are reading our FAQs before they give advice to their clients. So there's a lot of good stuff there. I want you all to read it, including in the COVID-19 bulletin is a chart which sets out, based on your normal AGM deadline, based on the COVID-19 emergency order that suspended AGMs. It sets out what your new AGM date should be, and I suggest that everyone take a look at it. So, moving on, we have a number of questions here which we're going to go to. And then we're going to get back and discuss some important issues that have resulted from the revocation of the emergency order. So, first question. Whoa, there's lots of them here. Jerry DiDonato. He's famous now for forcing me to play my saxophone. Good morning, Brian. How is your musical career going? Well, Jerry, as I said last time, my wife is not letting me out of the basement until I tell her that I practiced enough to become a great player. So she's insisting that I stay in that basement and practice. So I'm going to do that and continue to do that. And when I become a star, then I'll let you know. Jerry DiDonato question. AGM, 4-part question. Okay. We've heard that in-person indoor AGMs may be held over 1 or 2 back-to-back sessions/meetings. Question, is this permissible? And if so, how will the quorum be determined? So I guess the real issue here is, if you're going to have a indoor meeting, you're capped at 50 people. That is the directives from the Ontario government. Stage 3, in-person meeting, capped at 50 people. So if you're going to have an in-person AGM, and I will advise you shortly on my opinion on that, but if you are insistent on an in-person AGM, you will be capped at 50 persons. Now, if you will have there some management people, lucky them. If you're going to have the board of directors, already you're going to be looking at 5-6 people. If the auditor is going to attend and the lawyer, well, from the 50, you're probably down to about 40 potential attendees for your owners. So the question is, what happens to the other owners who would like to be part of the in-person AGM? So discussions have been had whether it would be permissible to have the owners come to the AGM in sessions. And I am of the view that that is permissible. And how you would do it is that you would set up your AGM and you would have specific times or specific blocks of time for specific groups of residents. But it would in the end be one AGM. And the question would be, how would you count your quorum? Your quorum would be the totality of all the people that attended, let's call it the 2 or 3 sessions. And the voting would be done as a totality of the 2 or 3 sessions. What you would have here is a meeting, but it would be sort of like that movie Groundhog Day, that it would repeat itself. So as many sessions as you would have, you would repeat what you said in the previous session. So at the end of your 2 sessions or 3 sessions, everybody would have heard the auditor, everybody would have heard from the lawyer, everybody would have heard from the board, and all votes would have been tallied at the end. So there would be motions made, there would be seconders, and there would be votes taken but not tallied until the last session was held. So Jerry then asks us, is a quorum required for each session, or is this determined at registration for the entire meeting? I'm going to suggest that the quorum is the totality of the sessions. Question 3 from Jerry, how is the election process for directors conducted in each session, and how will nominations from the floor be handled, or must the election process be conducted as a single exercise. Again, I'm going to say that voting will be tallied at the end. It will be the totality. We would have to work out the mechanics of whether the election had a two-part component, being one vote for owners of owner-occupied units and one part being for all owners for the general position, and that we would have to figure out the best process possible. Continuing along this, I see Olivia, a wonderful manager in her own right, has asked a similar question, and I think we've answered that. We've answered these questions, all right. So now that we're on the topic of AGMs, I'm just going to say that the majority of the AGMs today are being done virtually. They're being done remotely, and there's a number of different types of AGMs that you can have. So, for example, there are corporations that just want a virtual meeting, and they just want a virtual meeting, and everybody is going to be voting and attending electronically. So there will be electronic voting, and of course you can always have, and you should be having, voting by proxy as well. So if you've got an electronic meeting, you can have voting electronically or voting by proxy. That's what you need for the electronic meeting. And I want everybody to know that you need to differentiate going forward between how are we going to have our meeting, and that's going to be either in person or electronically. So that's issue one. Issue number two is, how are we going to vote? There's two separate issues here. So you can have an in-person meeting, or you can have an electronic/virtual meeting. That's number one. Second consideration is, how will we vote? So if it's an electronic meeting, you can vote electronically and by proxy. And those can be either electronic submission of proxies or the standard proxy that's on paper. So that's that item. Or you can say, we don't want to have an electronic meeting. We want to have an in-person meeting. And this goes to Jerry DiDonato's questions. Okay, we want an in-person meeting. So how are you going to do that? Well, if you're going to have an in-person meeting, again, the entire meeting is capped at 50 people. Therefore, you need to advise owners in your preliminary notice of meeting with an appropriate letter from either the board, the manager, or the condo lawyer as to the protocol for that in-person meeting. And that notification would also go out with the actual notice of meeting package. So what would you say in your letter to owners? You'd say, number one, if you want to come to the in-person meeting, you will have to reserve in advance. And there will be only a maximum of one person allowed at the meeting per unit. And you need to reserve in advance by a certain date. And if you're not going to be able to come after you reserve, please advise management so that your space can be given to somebody else. So just like a nice, beautiful restaurant, you need to reserve to go to this AGM in advance. And just like in a nice, beautiful restaurant, when all the reservations have been taken up, there are no tables for you. So at this AGM that we're discussing, the in-person AGM, there will be no chair for you. So therefore, once the reservation limit has been maxed out, whoever has not reserved on a timely basis, or whoever is not comfortable to go to the in-person AGM will be able to vote by proxy, okay? Because again, this is an in-person meeting, so the only way you can vote in the in-person meeting, they'll be able to vote by proxy. And that is going to be, the old-fashioned way. Now, you can have a hybrid. A hybrid would be an in-person meeting with an electronic component. So you could have a virtual meeting and an in-person meeting together. So when you capped your maximum capacity of 50 people, you'd be able to have the other people who did not want to go to the meeting or couldn't get in, those people would be able to see the meeting virtually on their computer or on their smartphone, and they would be able to vote either in person or by proxy. Now, we have had meetings where in condominium corporations that had a more mature community, and we were advised by management and the board, there's no way that our owners can use technology. If they're lucky, they can get on the computer and read the news, and that's it. And we were advised that it would be impossible to have a virtual meeting, to have electronic voting. And so in those specific communities, what we went forward with was proxies. And they were paper proxies, the old way that everybody could vote and be part of the meeting. And this is how those meetings have gone forward. So there's a number of different ways. I will tell you now, and I mentioned this the last time we had our live stream, that our office was considering putting together a virtual meeting package, including electronic voting. And we thought about this because there are 2 or 3 companies that are providing electronic voting platforms, and they are totally booked up because there's only 3 companies, I believe, and they have limited capacity with their servers. And so what we did is in our office, we sourced out a fabulous state-of-the-art virtual meeting and electronic voting package. And now we are offering it to all of our clients and even corporations that are not clients of ours. And we will chair your meeting using our own virtual software and electronic voting at and we'll do that. And we rolled out our program a week ago. Our phones really have been ringing off the hook with board members and managers that are absolutely desperate to hold a virtual meeting with electronic voting. And I'm happy to say that we are able to accommodate everybody who's calling us. So that is a great thing. We understand how meetings work, and you're getting a lawyer, myself, along with our other 5 or 6 chair people. We have the capacity. We chair your meeting. We also host your meeting. We have the technological wherewithal, and everything has been going great. So we also, on the same topic, want to discuss bylaws. And as you know, when the emergency order was rescinded or revoked, all of the all of the orders went into what's called Bill 190. So even though the government is not coming out any longer with, extending the emergency order, they don't have to do that because all of the orders are now part of Bill 190, and they're all in there. And one of the things that's important for condominiums is during the emergency order, during the emergency period, there was a suspension for all AGMs because, as you know, you have to have your AGM within 6 months of your year end. And there was a suspension as well that you didn't need to have a bylaw in order to have an electronic meeting or to vote electronically. Now, the Bill 190 sets out that the emergency orders, which were revoked on July the 24th, will still have effect for 120 days from July 24th. And that 120 days is November 21. So what that means is that you can only hold a virtual meeting and vote electronically without a bylaw up until November 21. After November 21, you cannot do that without having a bylaw in place. So my very, very strong recommendation to everybody is to ensure that you have a electronic voting and virtual meeting bylaw drafted and passed and voted on by the owners at your upcoming AGM. So what you do is you get your bylaw drafted and you add your bylaw as an agenda item at your AGM. And this way you can pass your bylaw, which, by the way, is what they call a low threshold bylaw, meaning it can be passed by the majority of the owners either in the room or by proxy or voting electronically. So it's a majority of the people at the meeting, provided you have the quorum, unlike a lot of other more substantial bylaws where you need over 50% of the owners of the units. Okay, so those are really, really important things. Now, moving back to the questions. SLTC owner, How can an owner of multiple units attending and voting for the election of directors at a virtual AGM cast their votes for such election with the limited time allowed for all units? So if an owner has multiple units, they would have either multiple links or, depending upon the voting software, for example, with the voting software that our office is using, you can give a weight to a vote. So for example, if somebody had 1 unit, the weight for that vote is 1. If somebody owned 10 units, what we can do is we can program that owner to have a weight of 10, and that person can have 10 votes when they cast their ballot. And that's the way you do that. And the further question is, how are such votes tabulated and counted? So for virtual AGMs what we are trying to do here at our office with the AGMs is we're trying to, with our software, mimic as best as possible an in-person AGM. And in an in-person AGM, people cast their ballots at the appropriate time, and then the scrutineers count the ballots as well as the proxies. And so what we're doing for the virtual meetings is when people cast their votes electronically, we get an instantaneous result. And what we do is, prior to the meeting, when the proxies come in, and they're coming in at the site office, and normally what we're doing is we're having the proxies tabulated at the on-site office by management, and they will provide us with the totals. What we can also do is we can have all of the proxies either picked up in a sealed box or scanned and sent over to our office, and we can actually tabulate them all and do that from our office. But the bottom line is, it's the vote is almost instantaneous when you're doing the virtual meeting, because electronically they're all tabulated immediately, and then for the proxies they're already tabulated in advance. Next question. If a proxy holder is attending a virtual AGM and voting for the election of directors on behalf of, say, 10 to 20 unit owners, how can he or she cast such votes on their behalf in the limited time frame? Again, depending upon how you set things up, we can set things up so that, if you're voting 20 units, your one vote is 20, or you can get 20 links. But definitely, there's no way that you should not be able to vote. You should have the chairperson of the meeting, and the person who is hosting the meeting needs to provide appropriate time for this. So when we're doing our meetings, I will tell you that our chair people from our office and the hosts are sitting in the same room. It's not, you don't have a host somewhere, sitting in some office somewhere, and the chairperson is sitting in another office somewhere, and between the two of them, the right shoe doesn't know what the left shoe is doing. Everybody's in the same office. That's what you need in order to do a proper job. Next question. Hello, from Dread Bain. There's a situation where there are 3 board members with a dysfunctional board. Welcome to my life. One of the board members is inactive while the other are at odds with each other. And then we continue down. One board member is refusing to sign the draft financials. So what we have here, we have a board of 3. One person is inactive or comatose, however you want to put it, and the other 2 can't get along. And of course, you need 2 people. You need a majority is 2 people, and the board's not working. To me, either you're going to wait for your upcoming AGM, where everybody's going to try to vote in a new board member, or there's going to be a requisition to remove one of the people. I suggest the inactive person. But clearly, this isn't a situation that can continue, because no business can get done. So, properly speaking, and you would think that during the pandemic there wouldn't be requisition meetings for removal of board members, but I want to tell you that requisition meetings are very, very active these days. I guess everybody who was quiet during the peak of the COVID from March and April, they had a lot to think about, and now everybody's really active in their condominium community, calling their lawyers and beating up their managers. Next, whoops. Here's a very good question. How can owners of owner-occupied units be verified in a virtual setting? It's not sufficient when you're having a virtual meeting just to have a person who's great at technology doing your meeting, because they are not getting all the intricacies and the important niceties of what you need to do to chair a proper meeting. So if you've got a condo manager with experience, they can chair that meeting. Better to me would be the lawyer to chair the meeting who has experience in condominium AGMs. As far as owner-occupied units, the chairperson needs to have the list in advance. The person who is hosting needs to properly set up the computer system so that only the owners of owner-occupied units can vote for one position, the owner-occupied vote position, and then they can vote. Everybody else can vote for the other position. You need to set up your list properly on your software, and not all software can do that. But you need to be very careful in how you're doing that, because at the end of the day, these AGMs mean something. At the end of the day, these elections mean something. And as we all know, the being on the board and being able to, provide direction to the corporation and take all of these very important decisions, that's really, really something that's substantial. And you cannot just leave it all to, Joe Technician who's great at computers and knows nothing about condo law, and is pressing all his buttons and the votes are going wrong and so on and so forth. I will tell you this, that in addition to knowing what you're doing, the software needs to be supported by a very large computer server. And before we, chose the software that we are presently using, we ensured that our software could handle many, many, many meetings simultaneously. I was recently chairing a meeting with a third-party company who was doing the hosting, and because their server wasn't sufficient, the server crashed, and the electronic voting could not be done. And the technician basically told everybody who was on the line, who had clicked into the meeting, please send me an email with who you want to vote for, and that's how we're going to do it. So I'm going to tell you, as a condo lawyer, that's not sufficient. That's not the way things have to be done. So again, we're trying to mimic with our software as closely as possible what would happen at a meeting that would be in person. Next question here. Similar question in dealing with leased out units, but I think we've answered that. Now we have at 1207, Julia Lurier. So Julia, welcome, and how are you? As I've said before, Julia is a fantastic condo lawyer with our office, and not only is she great in condo law, but she's great in producing babies. Yes, and she is home on maternity leave with 2 beautiful daughters. And I will tell you that Julia's coming back November the 1st, and we can hardly wait for her to come back. So, Julia, thanks for tuning in. Next question. And another excellent question from SLTC owner. How are scrutineers appointed for virtual AGMs, and how are they able to exercise their responsibilities as scrutineers in a virtual setting? Well, this is a fantastic question, and we are thinking of every single question and answer as we move forward with virtual meetings. So how do you appoint the scrutineers? The scrutineers are usually appointed by the chair or from the body of the meeting. And with a virtual meeting, of course, there's no body of the meeting that you could, say, we'd like to get 2 or 3 scrutineers to assist, and people pick up their hands and hopefully they volunteer to scrutinize the documentation. The question really is, how do you do this in a virtual meeting when there's nobody there? And what I'm suggesting, because the tabulation of the ballots and the tabulation of the proxies, and not only the tabulation of the proxies, but the review of the proxies are very, very important and essential to any type of election, whether it's condominium or the election that our good friends are having south of the border. My view is that in light of COVID-19, in light of social distancing, in light of the fact that people, really should not be commingling, let's call it that. You can either you can either appoint, or the scrutineer could appoint someone from his or her law firm or two people from that law firm to be scrutineers. You could have condo management be the scrutineer off-site. There's various different, ways that you can, try to figure this out. But again, that's a challenge and something that is, should be thought of in advance of a meeting. And that's something that we are looking at very carefully as well. Dreadbane, how can the corporation proceed? Can we send the draft? Oh, this is going to the financial statements. So this is Dreadbane going back to the 3 board members, one who was comatose or inactive, and 2 that didn't get along. The question was, can we send the draft financials with 1 signature as part of the AGM package? My recollection is you needed 2 signatures on one of the pages of the financial statements. So if they're not going to get along and they're not going to be able to, approve it, then I presume what you're going to have to do is send out the financial statements in the draft form that it is, because I don't know what else you can do, and the auditor will be either at your meeting in person or virtually, and he can go through the financials with everybody there. Next question. Can we arrange an online demo of your virtual e-voting system ahead of our upcoming virtual AGM? So this is SLTC owner, and I'm dying to know who you are because your questions are great. But right now you're anonymous. Yes, the answer is yes. You can arrange for an online demo so that everybody is comfortable with what you will be getting. It's important, and the integrity of the election is important, and the confidence of the owners and the confidence of the community in the integrity of the election is important. We're not like our friends south of the border. We're not doing mail-in yet. Next. Olivia Claveau. Can we limit 1 person from each unit in order to stretch the number of units to 50 people and RSVP before the deadline? Yes, so we've gone through that. Yes, absolutely. Reservations, absolutely. 1 person max per unit. How can proxy holders attending the virtual AGM and who are not authorized by proxy givers to vote for the election of directors be prevented by your e-voting system from voting? We can discuss this offline, but our system is very sophisticated, and we are very thorough in ensuring that whoever's voting is the right person. Catherine Barbolini, hardworking condo manager, how are you? We are conducting in-suite heat pump maintenance. This maintenance helps prevent leaks. A tenant refuses to provide entry due to COVID-19 concerns. The owner insists that the work to be completed. Must this work be completed? Well, I'm going to suggest that you need the work to be completed. It's essential that it be completed. I would say that if the condo corporation wants to move forward with entering into the unit to complete the work, they advise, of course, the unit owner. If the tenant is going to refuse, this is an issue really between the owner, i.e. the landlord, and the tenant. But I would say that if there's going to be a significant additional cost for the HVAC people to come back, that cost, you should consider passing that cost on to the owner. And this deals with not only this situation, but any situation where there's a right of entry. So we have the COVID-19 pandemic. We have to be sensitive to the spread of that disease. We have to be sensitive to owners or residents not wanting people to enter their suites. These are all legitimate concerns, and we need to work around or work together to ensure that work that needs to get done in a unit gets done, whether that is having someone coming in obviously with a mask, with gloves, with personal protection equipment, with a visor, and to do everything possible to ensure as best as possible that there are no respiratory droplets, etc., that are being spread within the unit. Next. Harold Stavis. I'm afraid to read out his question. Keep it clean, Harold. Harland. Do you have any idea if the deadline for AGMs will be extended because there are so few providers that can conduct a virtual AGM? I have not heard that the AGMs will be extended. It would be definitely something that is a consideration, but I think that there are many corporations. I think everyone's going to do the very best job that they can, and we'll see what happens at the end of November. Next question here. Murray Johnson, in brackets, the troublemaker. The CAO website states that the manager should prepare a reopening plan for opening of amenities. I am yet to see this in management contracts. What are your thoughts? Okay, so I'll read it again. The CAO website states that the manager should prepare a reopening plan for the opening of amenities. So there are a number of websites, or rather the CAO website itself has a very good brochure on the opening up, or how you prepare for opening up your amenities. I know that the Ontario government has a number of excellent documents on this as well. It's obviously not going to be in a management contract, because who would have thought that here we are with COVID-19 where we had to close all our amenities, and now we have to reopen it, which is a big job and an expensive job for corporations that never budgeted for this. So you're not going to find it in a management agreement. I guess the question is, if there's additional hours, and I'm sure there are, that this requires, properly speaking, corporations have to make a decision, and that decision is whether we, book more hours with our management companies. Of course, you'll have to pay more money, or whether we not book more hours and we don't get the same service that we wanted or we expected, because there's only so many hours in the day that were budgeted. And if a lot of those hours are now being COVID-19 related, you're going to be short hours to do the other type of work that the manager needs to do. So it's really a conversation that management and boards need to have, a mature conversation. I underline that, because unfortunately COVID-19 is affecting everyone. The bottom line here is that you want to ensure that your residents are safe, that your owners are safe, that the tradespeople coming into the building are safe, that your condo manager, yes, your condo manager counts too, your condo manager should be safe as well. And you need to figure out what you need to do, how you need to distance. It's a very, very big job. It takes a lot of time, and it's going to take time away from the manager's regular duties. And properly speaking, I think you'll need to have more hours, and of course you'd have to compensate people for that. And it's not in anybody's budget, extra labor, and it's not in anybody's budget that we have to close our amenities and now we have to sanitize them and so on and so forth. But unfortunately, that's the world that we are in. Anna Cristo, how are you? Can we have a step-by-step process of the new bylaw so that the board completely understands the e-held AGM? My answer to you, Anna, is yes. So I will tell you this. Step one, of course, is as a manager, you bring this up to your board. Most boards are going to say yes, because it's only a reasonable thing to do, and it's a good thing to do moving forward. So board says, yeah, let's go forward with it. Number two, you should speak to your condo corporation lawyer. They should draft a proper bylaw, and a proper bylaw means two things. A proper bylaw means electronic voting and virtual meetings. There are some bylaws that we have seen that were drafted by some law firms which only dealt with electronic voting. I tell you now that that is 100% wrong, and they should refund whatever they charge for that bylaw, because it's not sufficient to just do a bylaw dealing with electronic voting. You must have a bylaw that deals with electronic voting and virtual meetings. You need both. It's impossible to have one without the other. You need them both. So let's assume that the bylaw has now been properly drafted. The bylaw goes back to the board. The board passes a resolution. You now have a resolution and you have a draft bylaw. You then have to call a meeting. And normally, either, as I said before, you're going to add that bylaw as an agenda item to your AGM if you're going to be having your meeting before November 21, because that would save you the cost and the time of a second meeting. If your meeting is not going to be before November 21, you would have to hold, if your AGM is not before November 21, you'd have to hold a specific meeting virtually or in person, specifically to pass your electronic voting virtual meeting bylaw. And once you do that, the bylaw needs to get registered in the land registry office, and then you are good to go. All right, Murray Johnson, stage 3 reopening is an economic kickstart. COVID-19 is very real. The first 10 million cases were spread over 6 months. The second 10 million happened in just 4 weeks. Don't mix the two up. All right, well, there's Murray Johnson, now an expert, a medical expert. So let me say a few things here that are important. And I know we've spoken a lot about AGMs. So I'm going to say this. AGMs, like board meetings, can be done right now virtually or in person. Virtually or in person. And of the many corporations that we have, only 1 or 2 have insisted that they want an in-person meeting. And they sent out, as managers do, as boards do, before you choose your date, they sent out an email to management for the availability of the manager. They sent out an email for the availability of the auditor. They sent out an email for the availability of the lawyer. And what came back very quickly was the email from the auditor saying, we will not come to your in-person meeting. We are happy to be there virtually. We're happy to give a written report to you. We will not be there in person. Okay? The next thing that came in was a note from the head office of the management company that said, we have very, very, very strict protocols in place for our management people if they are to attend in-person meetings. And if any of these protocols are not adhered to, we will not be there. If the protocols are going to be adhered to and our manager is there, but at the meeting, any of the owners are not adhering to the protocol after being warned to adhere to the protocol, our manager is leaving. And of course, then there was the lawyer who may or may not be attending, depending again on the protocols in place. So I will say this, putting aside these 3 integral components, being the manager, the lawyer, and the auditor, you need to also ascertain whether the owners want to go to an in-person meeting or not. And there's no point to say, yeah, we're going in person, and then the owners say, I'm not going in person, and then you have a meeting that's all paper proxy. So you need to really consider this carefully. So let me say this, and you have to give credit where it's due. So I'm going to give some credit here, if I can, to Crossbridge. And I'm going to just say this, by the way. Anybody who is tuning in and who has a good idea or a document that they want me to take a look at and to share with all of the viewers, with all of the people logging in, send it along to me. I will review it from the front to the back. And if I think it's appropriate for this live stream, I will review it and everybody can benefit from the knowledge. So Crossbridge, and I think it was Mr. Johnson, prepared some really good policy statements or operational statements dealing with AGMs and dealing with board meetings. So I'm just going to touch base on a few of them. I read it through, and these are things that are reasonable and they're sensible and they are consistent with good practice and with the Ontario government directives. So the first thing everybody has to understand and accept, although it may be difficult to accept, is when you have your condo manager or your minute taker or your auditor or your lawyer, etc., at a condo in-person meeting, that meeting becomes a workplace under the occupational health and safety legislation. And employers, such as a management company, because they are an employer at the workplace, and if there's a meeting, that's the workplace, they are responsible, along with the condo corps, for the safety of those employees. So here's a number of things that you need to keep in mind if you want to think about an in-person meeting. Number one, you must have physical distancing. That is the law. At least 6 feet or 2 meters between attendees. You must have physical distances. That means the chairs have to be at least 6 feet or 2 meters apart. And that means that you can't be moving the chair closer than 6 feet. It's got to be at least 6 feet apart. People coming into the meeting that are there, you have to have, just like you have to go shopping and pretend you're in Loblaws or Longo's, you need a row that people are going down one row and up the other row. You don't want people bumping into each other or in close contact in the rows. You need to have the meeting room cleaned and sanitized before the meeting and after. People entering the meeting should be a policy that they must sanitize their hands as they're entering into the meeting. They're not allowed to get up and walk around other than to get up to go to the washroom. You need to be careful for the registration of all the owners. The owners have to be coming in where there's at least 6 feet or 2 meters between them. They can't be bunched up at the registration table. The registration person has to be 6 feet away from the person who's registering, or they have to be wearing a significant mask, and I would suggest a shield, a plexiglass shield between themselves and the person who's coming to register to avoid any type of spread of respiratory droplets, etc. So, these are things that are very important. You have to bring your own pen. You're not allowed to share pens when you're going to make your ballots. Another question is, how are you going to collect those ballots? People are not touching paper, and there's going to have to be some type of a selfie stick to get those ballots. People are going to have to wear gloves. Attendees will have to be wearing masks at all times, and that includes speaking when respiratory droplets might be, coming out of your mouth. No mic, because the mic can be infected as well. No food, and on and on and on. So what I'm saying here is, whether it's an AGM or it's a board meeting, you need to practice social distancing. If you're going to have this inside meeting, you really need to think it through, because the last thing you want is to, have this in-person meeting and nobody's immune from COVID-19. And if somebody has it or they're asymptomatic and somebody gets it, well, I don't think, the answer, our condo community was not very sophisticated with technology. I don't think that's going to be a great excuse to the community that has the spread of COVID-19. So I'm not trying to be a fear-mongering person, but we need to use common sense and we need to be proactive. So this is what I'm saying to you. We're going to go back to a few more questions, and then I'm going to discuss one last thing. Tova Burley, keep in mind that holding an in-person meeting still requires physical distancing of 6 feet, plus the requirement of owners to wear masks. Exactly correct, Tova. Thank you for your comment. Leo Alvarez, If the board allows the installation of lock boxes in the common areas, should the listing broker provide a COVID-19 protocol for the sanitation of the lock boxes and sign a waiver of liability? Well, I tell you this, the condo corporations are the occupiers of the common elements, and the liability under the relevant legislation, the Occupiers Liability Act, puts an obligation on condo corporations. I'm going to suggest that if a corporation is going to allow a listing broker to put a lockbox, which is a little box with the unit key in there, that has a certain code, so real estate agents that want to show the property can go to that box and get the key for the unit. I'm going to say that it would be a very smart thing to have a liability waiver signed by the listing agent for sure. And I'm going to suggest that when the selling agent comes knocking at the reception desk, that he sign the waiver as well. So Harlan Stavis makes a comment here that one should consider taking the participant's temperature before entering a meeting, and that is also a good consideration. So let me say this, and again, people that know about our live stream, and if they don't, they should, and everybody who hears the live stream should tell their friends and their other board members and managers, because there's lots of stuff that you should know about. I received something else, and if you heard the live stream about 2 weeks ago, Rudy Petershofer came on and brought up an issue dealing with HVAC, dealing with ventilation, and he said, well, what about the ventilation, and how should we, what are we considering about that in regards to helping stop the spread of COVID-19? And Rudy very generously sent me a document, and it's called ASHRAE Position Document on Infectious Aerosols. And so aerosols, I first thought it was like, this thing you use in the morning, to ensure that you didn't have the wrong type of odor for your body. But in fact, aerosols are the spreading through the air of, various contaminants. And there's a organization called ASHRAE. And ASHRAE stands for the American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers. And they have a position paper on infectious aerosols. Again, it's not body deodorant. Aerosols as in the spreading of infectious diseases through the air. And this document was approved in April of 2020, and it's good until April of 2023. And basically, it sets out that through respiratory particles, you can have the spread of these infectious diseases, and appropriate ventilation equipment can assist in, not prevent, but can assist in breaking down the spread of airborne diseases. And so I'm not an engineer or a doctor, although you might think I am, but I'm not. I will just tell you quickly what it says here in the conclusions and recommendations, because that's what you got to go to when you get a big, long report, as we all know when you get a report from a lawyer. It basically says infectious aerosols can be disseminated through various buildings by pathways that include air distribution systems and interzone airflows. Various strategies have been found to be effective at controlling transmission, including optimizing airflow patterns, directional airflow, zone pressurization, general exhaust ventilation, etc. So I'm going to tell you this, that the ventilation is very important. If you read the directives from the Ontario government with respect to gyms, one of their recommendations deals with ventilation and deals with fans and the spreading of respiratory droplets through fans, high-powered fans or high-powered ventilation that pushes the air. So you need to be alert to ventilation. I want to thank Rudy for sending me the report. I think that for condominium corporations, especially those in high-rise buildings and those that have recreational facilities, you need to keep ventilation in mind. And I think that it would be prudent to speak to your manager and to discuss this issue with your manager and have them bring in an expert in HVAC to ensure that the manner in which your common element areas, lobby included, are being ventilated, are being done in a manner that is as best as possible, in a manner that is going to assist and not promote the spreading of the droplets. I guess we are now at 55 minutes. So I want to thank everybody again for tuning in. We're going to be back next week. Bradley Chaplick will be hosting next week's session. Brad and I re-rotate between the two of us on doing this session. We find that we are pleased to provide the knowledge and the information to everybody. As I said before, this started off as something that we did because we wanted to keep the entire condo community, board members, owners, residents, managers. We wanted to keep everybody together because we were leading such an isolated existence when the pandemic was in its peak. We feel that through this session we can all share various experiences that we're all having, and our hope is that even post COVID-19 we'll be able to continue these live streams, because we feel that if everybody gave 1 hour of their time, and their time is valuable, if you're in the condo industry, this is something that you should be tuning into and assisting yourself and your boards and your management team with the knowledge. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next week, and be safe and take care of each other, and we'll see you and keep well. Thank you.